Well, no, I see we're in a low-key room, low-ceiling room, not smoky. Doesn't smell like stale beer.
A little louder, sir.
And doesn't smell like stale beer. And it's not 1774. But the sense of the Sons of Liberty is in here.
Hey.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to come before you and speak to me. My name is Tim Chichester. We say Chichester because we're more Irish than English. And my background is nuclear marine engineering with a very heavy dose of economics. I worked for 20 years for a Fortune 500 company, the last 5 of which was modeling the economy of New York State from Buffalo down through Montauk Point. We had about 30 people doing that. And then I went off and I started my own business. I'm an entrepreneur. I've had 2 businesses. And in between those 2 businesses, around the year 2001, I became heavily involved in what was going on with John Ashcroft. Started something called Lincoln Standards Act. And the reason why you hear Leahy and Durbin whine about they're accusing us of Christian bigotry, because I did way back then. And having succeeded in that, I then said to myself that they're really vulnerable on the social side, because most of the damage done to us is done on social terrain through the social engineering or the socialists, the progressives, whatever you want to call them, because they're chameleons. They have a dozen different colors and themes. But the essence of it is this: when we look at virtually every fiscal disaster we have, it has been brought to us through social engineering, whether it's the Fannie Mae, whether it's the pending disaster of the immigration situation. Again and again and again, if you look at the attack upon religion, what you see is increasing levels of promiscuity. When you see the addiction to pornography, all of these things have social costs. The estimate alone for abortion is somewhere it's around $50 trillion net. $50 trillion net gross domestic product. Okay, you can't sell to a population that isn't there. We are, as a matter of fact, we are actually in a point where at the crest of a demographic wave that is about to crash downwards. If anybody knows anything about demographics, and that was part of what I did, we saw back then the smaller and smaller family size, the things, double income, no kids, and as you go towards the incredible level of entitlements and the expanding layers of individuals who are entitled to them, and down lower and lower, the smaller and smaller levels of productive individuals who have to support that, you have the seeds of economic disaster. Okay. That is what is happening to us. Russia is already going through this process. If you look at Soviet Russia, they're in a population fall, they're in a demographic disaster beyond their imagination. So there are a lot of issues that are going on. There are a lot of issues, a lot of causes that have brought us to where we are. But we have to understand certain things. One is the monetary disaster that we're in, not the fiscal. That has to do with budget. The monetary disaster that is now facing us is a tidal wave that is about to engulf us. It's going to happen. Okay. Anybody who thinks they're going to go down to Washington, fix the books, and make it right is clueless. What we can do is we can go down there and we can understand that we do our very best to hack that budget in half. I'm sure that the $7 billion, our share of the National Education Department, if it came back to us, would be a lot better than having idiots in Washington tell 19 million people how to run their educational system. I'm sure that we're competent enough to do that without people in Washington telling us to do it. But not only a whole slew of different government departments and agencies and whatever. Okay. So, in terms of the fiscal side, I have no qualms about literally cutting it in half. Absolutely none whatsoever. I have watched for my entire life power go from county level to the state and then down to Washington. Okay. And now we have an aggregation of power in Washington that threatens the very democracy, the republic that we have. If we do not turn this around, we're done. And the way it is going to be, what's going to happen is the people who go down there this election are going to the Alamo. Yeah. You have to understand that. Nobody is going to go down there, pull the levers, and make it all better. What we can do is go down there with the full knowledge is that we're fighting on this social terrain. The assets of Western civilization literally are exploding in front of us. That's what we see with these disasters. And we have to go down and we have to take the weight. For instance, we have a ship. Think of it, this analogy. We have a ship, a 500,000-ton ship that's been doing 27 knots, and suddenly you have to stop it. It doesn't stop. It takes 18 miles to stop that ship. What we can do is we can go down there and start that process. I have no qualms about throwing my bones in the gears to stop it. That's what has to be done. You have to understand that no matter what we do on the fiscal side, the budget cutting and all of that, it is only a temporizing measure if we do not win on the social side. We have to restore everything we do. We must restore a sense of family. We must restore and defend marriage. We must restore religious rights in the central marketplace. We have always been a godly people. I've been for years following Britain. I look at Britain, and the Brits have literally lost virtually all. They are more atheistic now in a pragmatic sense than Soviet Russia. And if you look, for instance, they now have about, the last count I saw was about 420 some odd times per day, an individual in London is on camera. George Orwell, who wrote Big Brother, 2 years ago had 14 cameras on his house. These people do not have the spiritual resources anymore to resist. You cannot resist if you do not have a sense of spirit. You cannot. You know, years ago, at the end of World War II, Douglas MacArthur gave his, you've probably all seen the famous scene, "These proceedings are closed," the big book on the deck of the Missouri. Okay. What you seldom have heard is what he said on the radio half hour or so later. He gave a very short speech to the world. And what he said was that we have reached a point where we can destroy our civilization. We have tried diplomacy. We have tried war. We have tried a dozen different methods. But unless we have a spiritual recrudescence, it is of the spirit if the flesh is to be saved. So we have to understand that we send people to Congress. If they're fixated on fixing the books, you will have simply another failure. Okay? They have to be solidly understand that all of this pro-life stuff that people have been ranting about for 37 years is real. All of these social issues have enormous impact upon what happens. Enormous impact upon what happens. So when I look at all of this, what I look at is the absolute necessity of fighting those issues, of looking and undoing the unconstitutional things that have been done to us, that is taking the power from New York, from Washington, and bringing it back to the states. More and more, as I look at the 17th Amendment, which gave direct election to the senators, I recognize, my God, that was not the intent of the founders. They had them elected by state legislatures so there would be a balance between state and federal government. When we changed to direct election, we changed to that mobocracy mentality. They're no longer responsive, but now you have 535 people who virtually run the world. Nobody should have that much power.
No.
Nobody.